God of War for the PlayStation 4 is 2018's Game of the Year. Developed by Santa Monica Studio and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment, God of War underwent a reimagining with game director Cory Barlog back at the helm long after his departure from the studio following his initial involvement in God of War 3. In the past, the series was all about hack-and-slash gameplay as players took control of Kratos, the once demigod turned God of War, who sought and achieved vengeance against Mount Olympus and his father Zeus. While the original series was an epic tale of its own, this reboot set out to achieve something greater. To see an old and tired Kratos live at terms with his notorious anger and rage. To see how he'd fare in the foreign realm of Midgard. To see how he'd act as a father, and how he'd not only handle his greatest responsibility, but teach his son, Atreus, to be better than him. Narrative and setting weren't the only things to change. We meet Kratos without his iconic Blades of Chaos, now wielding the Leviathan Frost Axe once held by his late wife Faye. The camera is more personal, going from an almost top-down wide shot to an intimate over-the-shoulder lock-off. Most impressive of all, the game runs, start to finish, in a single camera take. No cuts, no blank spots for the player's mind to fill the gaps. God of War turned the franchise on its head, and welcome players to a more grounded and connected experience. One of the biggest concerns from franchise fans was how the combat would be handled. With the new arsenal and camera style, they feared the flow of fighting would drastically be changed, or worse, come up short of their expectations. God of War feels better than any game I have ever played, with a responsive design that makes sense and animation to keep the experience fluid. The upper body work is bound to the shoulder buttons, making for quick access at all times. All the legwork, dodging, and Atreus skills, which you should definitely be using, are kept to the thumbsticks and face buttons, making an easy split in the mind of where to find the next move. The Leviathan Axe improves Kratos' versatility, now making him not only brutal up close, but deadly at long ranges. The axe offers immense potential in crowd control, with the ability to freeze enemies in place or keep them staggered in a volley. With the ridiculous amount of unlockable combos, the Leviathan Axe offers never-ending fun for players who just want to let loose on some Draugr. But you can throw the axe away, and when you do, you have just as much freedom with Kratos' fists. This playstyle outputs less damage, but builds up stun meter much more quickly to allow for those glorious executions. As someone who hates any type of shield mechanic and stays away from tank classes in all games, I love this shield. It's quick and reactive, and it makes you feel like you taught Captain America how to fight. The defensive counters offer some of the best turns, and I mean, who doesn't find this simply entertaining? But don't forget, you still have your axe. Press triangle at any point and it comes right back to you, wherever you are and wherever it was. You can't tell me that this isn't one of the most satisfying moments in a video game that you have ever experienced. But it isn't just about the combat. The axe can be used for so much more than typical video game weaponry. Use it for complex puzzles. Use it to obtain collectibles. Use it to wake up a giant serpent from native slumber. And it will always come back, striking whatever ends up in its path. About halfway through the game, players learn that they get to wield the Blades of Chaos after all, and not just for a single mission or two, but for the rest of the game and in any new game plus. As someone who never played the originals, even I felt the fan service in this scene. They offer the same breadth of combos and abilities as the axe, but add a new layer to elemental types and interactions with puzzles. What's great about this God of War is that you don't have to go it alone. As you progress, so does Atreus. He offers mild crowd control, singling out enemies to keep them off your back, and becomes increasingly more involved as his skills and confidence develop. His 2 arrow types offer supplemental damage or stun that can quickly turn a losing battle or simply give you a second to catch your breath. He also has a diverse set of support skills and will occasionally throw Kratos a healing stone in the heat of battle. With this final addition, players now have access to the axe, fist, Atreus' arrows, talismans, a shield, and the blades, all without ever having to open a weapon wheel or sift through an inventory mid-fight. God of War removes Kratos from ancient Greece and places him in the land of Midgard, and boy is it stunning. It's one of the most realized game worlds ever created, offering a varied yet consistent art style that allows players to view it from an understandable lens. The franchise's staple sense of scale is capitalized on and, paired with the one-shot camera, gives a reference point for where you are and how your actions shape the land. It's an open-ended approach to linear storytelling, anchoring its play space to the Lake of the Nine. Its design reminds me much of one of my favorite games, Banjo-Kazooie, in that the map intertwines and flows across its massive biomes seamlessly. While it leads you along a predetermined path, there are plenty of opportunities to veer off and explore. The world is littered with detail that serves to create a coherent visual language on where to go and what to do. Throughout your journey, you'll find barriers to branching areas that will taunt you to return with the means to move forward. Thankfully, the game builds a lot of the backtracking into the narrative, having you revisit locations from a different entry point and perspective. Even the fast travel mechanic is deliberate, as it exists not as a luxury to players, but a narrative device that aids pacing and furthers the greater plot. The marketing material for God of War mostly showed off Midgard, which led to my shock that we'd be traveling to alternate realms. While we may be closed off to visiting all 9 of the realms, what's offered here is quite substantial. Alfheim and Helheim are tied directly into story, serving as a backdrop to explain the greater conflicts of the world, while also forcing our heroes into situations where their internal struggles come to light. Both realms are fully mapped and warrant multiple returns to explore all they have to offer. The 2 challenge realms, Muspelheim and Niflheim, are more optional and unlocked after uncovering language ciphers scattered throughout the game. It's in these areas that your combat prowess will be tested. Muspelheim packs multiple instance scenarios with varying mechanics and degrees of difficulty, while Niflheim exists as a small but addicting roguelite with randomly shuffled time dungeons. These realms will be where you find some of the rarest resources and gear, and act as vehicles for some decent replayability. My favorite aspect of the world is how it takes the lore of the main narrative and casts it in every corner of the game. The collectibles in most games are usually mere excuses for trophy hunting and, aside from a paragraph of text in the game's codex, don't give much noticeable contribution to the world building. In God of War, there are many lore markers scattered throughout that call for Atreus to translate. Upon doing so, you get a mix of his bare, surface-level reactions and discussions between him and Kratos of what context these markers carry. Then, in the journal, you can read Atreus' further developed thoughts, understanding of the material, and what he took away from it. Finally, God of War takes one of the most boring activities, rowing in a boat, and supplements it with Mimir stories. The more lore markers you unlock, the more dialogue chains are sparked, as you are hand-fed tales of Norse myth, right from the great historian himself.
Story. What did you want to tell me about the Long War?
Both sides suffered tremendous losses, and for many of us, quite frankly, war was simply no fun anymore. But a rather senseless waste of precious life. Wouldn't you agree, brother? Precisely.
God of War offers a masterclass in world building, filling the game with just as much contextual substance as the range of its color palette. It's focused and wastes no space in its intent. It creates a place that draws curiosity with its form and rewards perspective and insight to those who walk its heralding paths. The story of God of War is built around a simple journey. The quest of Kratos and Atreus to carry Faye's ashes to the highest peak in all the realms. But at its core, it's much simpler than that. It's about relationships, more specifically, family relationships. the feud and rivalry between two opposing brothers, the resentment of a son toward his overbearing mother, the bond of a father and son who begin as strangers. God of War takes the family drama and disguises it as an action-adventure epic, where its characters must confront those who make them whole. Let's start with Brok and Sindri, the Dwarven Master Blacksmith brothers of Midgard. Brok is the rugged and brazen brute who works with his hands. His methods are bare bones and technique made out to be more traditional, whereas Sindri is more delicate, an OCD-ridden germaphobe who crafts legendary weapons but can't stand the sight of blood. Although the pair are polar opposites at face value, their issues with one another come from something much deeper: themselves. In your early encounters with each dwarf, they can't resist the chance to speak poorly of the other, claiming how they are much better off to pursue their businesses separately. But you see it from the moment you meet them. You know just by walking around the world that there are no customers. It's dead and empty, and they are partly to blame. We find out that their last job together was to forge Mjolnir, the divine weapon wielded by the tyrant Thor. Their actions led to an age of pain and oppression, as they armed the gods with the means to rule unconditionally. Instead of accepting this mistake, they cast blame on one another and suppress the lack of purpose and brokenness they feel. It's not until they hear some harsh words from Atreus that they've resolved their insecurities and come together to help our heroes, as a form of retribution for their past and an attempt to restore some of the world they had a hand in breaking. A bit more complicated of a dilemma is the relationship between Freya and her son Baldur. With her marriage to Odin turning out to be little more than a one-sided political move, Freya lives in exile, masking her association with the Aesir gods. As the prime nurturing spirit of the story, it's jarring to discover that she is the mother to a man so cruel. But he wasn't always the way we see him, rather, a product of his mother's overbearing love. In true Norse myth, Baldur is regarded much like Tyr, benevolent and loved by all. It's safe to assume that this was the case in God of War as well, but after his prophesied death, Freya cast a spell that made him invulnerable, not only to death and pain, but to any sensation whatsoever. It's a paradox in which the very love that led to his security left him stripped of that same emotion. Freya wants the world of Baldur, and he wants a world without Freya. They both use this tether of love as an instrument to hold each other hostage. Their relationship shows how love can be just as dangerous as it is empowering. That no matter how much you wish someone to act a certain way, to remain in a certain state, too much can smother a person, and too little can be replaced with extreme hatred. Then there's Kratos and Atreus. Again, two opposites meant to coexist. A stern father who's afraid of attachment and the realities of his past, and a son who sees a strong and brave man that has no time or interest in a weak boy that feels alone and lost. As their journey sets afoot, Atreus questions why he is left with this stranger who doesn't want him. Kratos contemplates the struggle of raising a child, treating his son as more of an object to guard, rather than a person to connect with. Much like Freya, he keeps Atreus shielded from the truths of the world, his world, and it comes not so much from a place of love, but the fear in acknowledging its existence. We see Atreus physically afflicted from being kept in the dark. Even after he learns of his godhood, Kratos avoids telling him his whole story, exactly what he wishes Atreus never becomes. Atreus lashes out, unsure of what example to follow. He becomes cold and impatient, because that's who Kratos is. It is until he sees the vision of Kratos and Zeus in Helheim that he starts to see the consequences of being a god. After seeing the fallout of their encounter with Baldur and Freya, Kratos finally realizes that his boy must know the truth. That a life of deception and lies would ultimately continue the cycle of pain and death. Having settled the air between themselves, they continue to Jotunheim and learn who Freya really was and the truth of Atreus' lineage to the giants. Kratos and Atreus' whole journey is about uncovering the truth of Kratos' past, the truth of Tyr and the giants, the truth of their godhood. The pair come to peace and finally form a solid bond by the end of the game. They also brought back the Jotunheim Tower and ideally freed the Valkyries, leaving Midgard in a bit of a better place than they found it. Maybe. Because they did set forth the coming of Ragnarok. I guess you can say truth heals all wounds, or at that time. I don't know. I guess we'll find out in the next game. With God of War being as perfected as it is, I'm not sure it itself makes me like it so much. It's clear how much passion was shoved in this game. It's one of the greatest risks I've seen from a game studio in an industry filled with cautious steps. A true rebuilding of a franchise that retains its epic prestige while evoking new tones of perspective and coming in pitch perfect on design and playability. Barlog and Santa Monica deserve this win, and I praise them for the grand experience that's revived my faith in games. It's been a long time since I've been this excited for any franchise, and it'll be a long time before I forget this incredible journey. Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Santa Monica Studio. Thank you, Sony. The tortoise definitely won.